Hello, this is Pittsburgh Pat, and I'm here with Ryan Doyle, the Verdigris Table. How are you, Ryan?
I am good this morning.
Cool. Yep. Morning after we played D&D last night, and it was a heavy combat session, and I learned a lot. I guess the highlight of the night, I'll go right to it, for me was the new chromatic orb spell.
Yes.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool because it's slightly more powerful and it's definitely more fun.
Well, here's
Um,
the part of the mechanic that I really liked was so it says, I mean, for you, anybody that's new, I'm just going to read the spell because, why not? Chromatic word is so cool. So it's an evocation spell, wizard, so you're dealing damage, right? It's just an instantaneous range of 9 feet, 90 feet. You do need a diamond worth 50 gold pieces, which we generally don't enforce components, but if you're into that sort of thing. Anyway, the description is you hurl an orb of energy at a target within range. Choose acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, or thunder for the type of orb you create, and then make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, target takes 3d8 damage of the chosen type. If you roll the same number on two or more of the damage d8s, the orb leaps to a different target of your choice within 30 feet of the target. Make an attack roll against the new target and make a new damage roll. The orb can't leap again unless you cast the spell with a 2+ spell slot. Using a higher spell slot, damage increases 1d8 per spell slot. The orb can leap a maximum number of times equal to the level of slots expended. And the creature can be targeted only once by each casting of this spell. So you could have like a kind of a chain, it's like a poor man's chain lightning,
mm,
right? And chain lightning is like a level 6 spell. So chromatic orb, you get a chance to hit two targets if you roll your dice and you get, like what happened with Bertram, the player character, I mean, I'm sorry, the person at the table's name is Bertram. The character's name is Eric. And he's a sorcerer. So he cast chromatic orb and got two hits because he rolled his damage dice and two of the dice had the same number.
well, at
So
one point he actually crit on it, which like greatly increases the damage, obviously doubles the damage, but it
yeah.
also doubles the odds that you're going to actually I guess it more than doubles the odds. I'd have to figure that out,
Yeah, we'll
literally.
have to
But
do the math on that. But
it makes it that much more likely that you're going to get doubles on the damage die somehow and have a jump. And that I know stuff like that happens in other games. I don't think there is a mechanic like that in what 2014 5e. Like I think that's the first that we've seen it in this Dungeons and Dragons 5.5, whatever we're calling it.
yeah, that's why it was remarkable. That's why I wanted to
Yeah.
bring it up right off the top because I was just like, wow, this is pretty intense. So that's cool. Yeah, so there's some hidden mechanics in this new book that I got to go through. And like, I mean, I thought I went through it pretty thoroughly, but obviously not.
Yeah. Every session we learn something new,
Yeah.
which is fun. I like it. There was a point where Pat, the other Pat was like, "Oh, we're getting out in the weeds." It's like we're living in the weeds right now, man.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Um,
Well, that's the whole point. I mean, the point of like converting over to 2024 was so we could learn the new rules and give them to you on these wonderful videos. So yeah, use them. We'll do the research for you. Play testing, literally.
mhm.
So we're on a ship that's been listing at sea, which is not on rocks, but listing out at sea. I was under the impression they were like it was reefed or something, but no, it's we were exploring the lower decks. That's where we left off last week, and we found a altar on one of the lower decks to Lolth, the spider goddess, the goddess that loves spiders, and the goddess of the drow, right? So
Mhm.
this is and so and we also found some butchered humanoid bones, which is ominous. And so yeah, so we kept exploring that lower deck. So there were how many combats? We have three combats, I think.
Uh,
maybe two. We
t two,
Yeah, two combats. We opened the door and
two.
we found a uh, long, narrow passageway that where fortunately the sorcerer did it, not the rogue, which is my character, looked for traps
Hmm.
and found one. So like we could have collapsed down into to the lower level where we know because of Patrick the Paladin's um, divine sense that there are undead waiting for us, and that's where our objective is. We're supposed to retrieve a metal box inside of a wooden box and bring that back to Saltmarsh to the quest giver, who is a tiefling underworld type. And so, yeah, this is fun stuff.
It's a it's a good one. This has a lot. There's a lot of like suspense and mystery, which was preserved. There were a lot of attempts to like, what's going on here? And like the players kind of figuring out like, okay, this is bad.
Yeah,
But like there, yeah, just like some cold dice got us to the point where we're like, yeah, there's bones. These are humanoid. They've been butchered. Draw your own conclusions what that means.
yeah.
You did get the captain's log of like
Well, you kind of gave it to
they got
us.
blown off course. They got separated from their escort. They like blew up on this like random uncharted island, and the last entry's like, I hope the locals are friendly. And and now you're, I don't know, in a boat that's somehow been taken over by Lolth worshippers, and
Well,
other things
that's
have
something
happened.
I guess we were meant to find the captain's log up one deck higher, and we didn't. So you did what a good DM does, and this is something for the new DMs who watch these videos out there. Like, you can reintroduce that. So so happens that like we killed what was it? A Eder,
Ettercap. Hmm.
yeah, we killed an Eder cap, and then so you
No,
presented,
there were three fights. The third fight
yeah.
was pretty handily dispatched, but yeah, the druid,
Hmm.
um, who was the last remaining, let's say, person who can speak, had the captain's luck because
Oh, the druid, right? Yeah.
I realized it was behind a check. Like you want to be very careful what kind of information you gatekeep.
Yeah.
Um, and in that room, that was the captain's quarters and became this like whatever temple, altar, sacrifice center to Lolth. You get the jewels for free on the altar, but it's a success to find the captain's log and the information about what's going on in here. And I see how you get there. I've done it myself a bunch of times. And I rolled with it in the moment and then regretted it. So I like didn't retcon it, but I moved. We were talking about quantum physics too last night. I
Yeah, we were.
I put it in superposition and decided like yes, they're going to find out the information about what's going on here because it's interesting and it's a better story and it doesn't there's no downside.
Yeah, but there is a tendency for DMs, I mean, I find myself, I've given out too much information too fast before, and I
Mhm,
don't want to do that. So I want to
mhm.
let the air of mystery be there and also have the opportunity for discovery. That those moments of discovery are wonderful for the player. So you want to have those kind of like, oh,
Yeah, it's interesting. That's the thing. You want that feeling of discovery. You want that reward for looking in the right place. And that's why a lot of the times if you look in the right place, I won't necessarily call for a check, you know,
yes,
because you don't have to you can do that without letting the dice say no, where it's like, okay, there's a hidden drawer in this desk. You search the desk, you find that hidden drawer. Versus, all right, roll a perception or investigation and you roll low. It's like, well, okay. And then, the rest of the players line up like, can I search that desk that they just searched? And my character would assume they did a good job, but my player knows they didn't. So,
yeah. No, see, you have to hold off on that. We said this in other videos, but it's good to reemphasize that if if people can just, save scum the checks, meaning if you let every player roll a perception check, eventually, you get 4 or 5 players. We have 5 players now at the table. Somebody's going to roll. high enough to succeed. So yeah, limited to one or maybe two people. But and that's the same thing with aid and with
Hmm.
other things like that where you're helping somebody with a check. Uh, Now, like Bardic Inspiration, for instance, I don't have a problem with that because that burns resource. So,
Right.
if that's how you want to spend your resource on checking if there's a trap in this drawer, this desk drawer, by all means. But that's one less you're going to be able to use for the upcoming struggles. So, yeah, good stuff. Uh, so yeah, we met a half orc with bark skin, and we had trouble with that. Like his bark skin, like kept him his AC high enough that a couple people had near misses on their attacks. So that's interesting. I always thought it was interesting. This is just a thing that I think about D&D is so you have an armor class. The armor class makes you harder to hit, right? So I always thought that's interesting, but wouldn't armor help you to resist damage, right? So
Hmm.
I guess that gets a little more complicated. So if you get into that sort of thing, like say I'm wearing plate armor, well, that will give you resistance to maybe slashing damage, right? Or stabbing damage, but will it give you resistance to other kinds of damage, So I guess there are probably other role-playing systems that deal with this in different ways, but D&D is always like, I put on better armor. Haha, I'm harder to hit.
Hmm.
Um, which narratively can be logical, sometimes illogical other times. So,
I always think of it as like a hit that deals damage, right? Like
oh,
it becomes hit or miss in black and white, and it's like, oh, you whiffed because this person is covered in armor. Like doesn't make sense. Like yeah, okay, you failed to draw blood, right? Like you hit a guy with a sword and he's wearing plate armor.
okay.
You got to hit him in the right spot to get something going. That's how I always think of it. And yeah, you're right. There are games that do like damage reduction out of the gate or like a damage threshold. There's different ways to get there. But yeah, narratively, a miss isn't always a miss
It's
in
a
the
hit without any a significant effect.
yeah.
So that's good to know. That's a great way to add a quiver or an arrow in your quiver for storytelling too, because you can say, you hit the guy, but it doesn't seem to have any effect.
In fact, I will, and again, the more complex the combat is, and the more math I'm doing, the less of the other side of my brain is functioning, is getting juice.
Right.
But when I'm on, if a character, PC or NPC or monster has a shield, right? And it's
Yeah,
within one or two, then it's like, okay, that's the shield in my mind stopping it, right? If he has an AC 18, you do a 17 to hit, like up, you hit like he stops that blow with the shield. So
that makes
you're
sense.
making contact.
Sure.
I feel like one's a whiff in my mind. Otherwise, yeah, it's all very abstract in a lot of ways. And it's trying to pretend it's always concrete, but it's like in these 6 seconds of blows, did you land one successfully that hurt the guy?
Yep. Yep. That makes a lot more sense. I like that. Um, we also found two large spiders in that room again, and spiders we love because they can deal regular damage, piercing damage, but then also poison damage if they hit you, and then you have to roll a Constitution saving throw to see if you can reduce that by half. But we have a couple guys in the group that can reduce damage, so that's
Yes.
pretty cool. The
Yes.
paladin and the monk can either move damage, and I think Patrick was saying that his paladin at a certain level will be able to take damage from somebody else, put it on himself if he wants,
Mm-hmm.
which is another
Mm-hmm.
interesting mechanic, right?
Yeah, I forget what that spell is, or that bonding.
It's a
Bonding.
class ability, I think,
I
maybe,
forget.
or
Yeah, shit. I
I'm not
forget what that's
sure.
called.
Yeah,
But yeah, he can. He's a defender. He can like, in my mind, he's moving his shield around if you're standing next to him, right?
yeah,
Um, and the monk now has deflect attacks, I believe is the verbiage.
yep, that's right.
Deflect missiles is now applicable to melee. So that's a big boost for monks. That's a little. load off of Dungeon Masters. This is like DM aphorism. Shoot your monks. You know, you always want your player's cool thing to work or to have opportunities to work. So you have to like create opportunities for the PCs to shine based on what they're built.
Right?
Um, but sometimes a monk. I also like any player ability that incentivizes you to run into danger.
Yeah, run towards the fire, right?
That's good. That's good game design. Where like I want to
Yes.
be in the thick of it because it gives me an opportunity. He spent a key point. He reduced the damage down to zero. I ruled that like he doesn't have to save for poison. If the piercing damage doesn't happen, he stopped the fangs from hitting his bloodstream. Um, or was it the claw? Well, no, he reduced zero to a spider, and he also reduced zero to one of the ghoul's claws, which are paralytic. It sucks to be hit by them. And he spent another key point to redirect that attack.
Yes.
So we had the classic quit hitting yourself moment, which is always fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it has that martial arts feel, right? So it has
Yes.
that Aikido is especially one
Mm.
where you use your opponent's energy against to move them or against them. Uh, so at level 3, every monk gets this. It's not a specific to a subclass, and it's called, yeah, deflect attacks. When an attack roll hits you, and its damage includes bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, you can take a reaction. So use your reaction to reduce the attack's total damage against you. The reduction equals 1d10 plus your dex modifier, which is your principal stat when you're a monk, and your monk level. Now it says if you reduce the damage to zero, you can expend the one focus point. And that's what we're saying. Focus
Uh,
points, key points,
Key
they've
points
been
are.
renamed,
Yep.
but that's exactly what Ryan just described. To redirect some of the attack's force. If you do so, choose a creature you can see within 5 feet of you. If the attack was a melee attack, or a creature you can see within 60 feet of you that isn't behind total cover if the attack was a ranged attack. So that's like, Jedi like deflecting laser blasts and putting
Hmm.
them into like an opponent. The creature must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take damage equal to 2 rolls of your martial arts die plus your dexterity modifier. So it's a complex mechanic. You're using all 7 of your dice here almost. The damage is the same type as dealt by the attack, which makes sense, right? If you're deflecting an arrow, you're gonna do piercing damage with that, so if it's deflected. But that's yeah, they've made some of these mechanics really neat, but you do have to read them and because there's a lot going on.
Yes.
Not simple.
And I am in a season again where I am willing to read things out at the table, and that's not everybody's cup of tea. In a lot of ways, the dungeon master's job is to keep things interesting and moving and cooking. But I find one, it's a lot to maintain. I got a couple games going right now. I got a couple different systems rattling around in my brain.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
a lot of the times my judgment calls are wrong, straight up. Like my first instinct is 5e or Pathfinder 2e or old school or whatever. Like it's too many things rattling around in my brain right now. But
Sure.
the other thing is stopping and looking it up and discussing it as a group means it happens once. And now everybody knows. It's much more clarifying for the player and for me. Everybody learns the new chromatic orb structure last night. Everybody learned the new deflect missiles is deflect attacks last night. Um, and again, that's season 2 taste, but I am comfortable and actually encourage people to like try that because a lot of advice out there calls that wrong, and maybe you don't like it. That's cool, but there's value to that, and no one's gonna come and yell at you because you asked the character to describe their ability, and it's worth the 30 seconds.
Well, no, I mean, we've all been, I don't know, if you're an experienced player, you may or may not have been at a table where somebody's playing wizard for the first time, and so they have to read each and every spell out loud. And that's fine the first time, right? But
Yes.
if it's
Well,
every
that's
time, then that's a little bit slows things down.
yes, yes. That's the thing. And the alternative is I cast darkness And it's just like, okay, you do that. And then it's like, wait, that's what it does. Oh no, no one can see. Everyone's blind except for the dragon that has blind sight that we're fighting.
Right.
Um, that that's kind of the alternative. So yeah, like every all things in balance. If it's the fifth time someone's cast chromatic orb and we gotta sit down and talk about it for a minute, like okay, now it's an issue. Now you got to know your stuff, or I know it because it's been described to me and I've looked it up and read it, absorbed that information multiple ways, and now I'm just like I just can call it. It's
Yeah, and so
imprinted further in
can
my brain.
the other players.
Yes.
And that's the other thing. So
Yes.
they could say, no, 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 don't do that because it has this additional effect or something of that nature. Um, so like at one point, the reason we were talking about quantum physics was because Bertram wanted to cast a area of effect spell, but he wanted to cast it with careful spell
Hmm.
because he's a sorcerer, he might be able to do that. But it just didn't make sense. Like the way he wanted to do it was I forget. The paladin was in the middle of three enemies, and he wanted to cast it so the paladin didn't get affected by thunder
I think it
wave.
was it was Thunder. I think well because it came off of him. I think
Yes,
he cast Shatter and then he was gonna cast Thunder Wave as if it were Shatter. I think was the signal cross there.
right.
Yeah, I forget why that was quantum position. Yeah, I don't
Oh,
know.
I think it had something to do with he was on the other side of a doorway, so
Hmm.
he wanted to cast it into the next room, but if it's coming off of him, then it has to go through the doorway.
Oh,
And
there was yeah, and then
so
like we
we
were
made
talking
an
about
analogy,
Craig made a joke about like the quantum slit, like the
yeah,
wave going through the
the double
yeah
slit
yeah
experiment.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So that
what a bunch of nerds.
Yeah, we need two doors in order for that to work, not one. Uh, yeah, so that was, yeah, well, I mean, this is the type of stuff that comes up.
Oh, I love
So,
it. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
you learning. It's a learning experience, folks. There's science involved. It's not just magic.
That's the thing, guys. If you're putting on an actual play, okay, it's a different set of priorities. Hold yourself to a different standard. If you are hanging out with some friends on a weeknight, then like it's cool. Is everybody having fun and laughing and yucking it up? Like, okay, cool. I don't care that we talked about, I don't know, the latest thing on Netflix in the middle of a thing because like he got up to get a cup of coffee. Like
Right. Which we
it's
did at
more
one point.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
we did like
right.
yeah, you want those intense moments, but at the same time, if you create those intense moments, people almost subconsciously are going to reach for the pressure release valve, right? If someone cracks a joke to relieve tension of the sinking ship haunted house mission that's covered in spiders, that means you're doing your job, not that they are undermining the tone. That means they need to do that because there is tension there. They're afraid they're going to die in
That's a
some part of their brain.
That's a
Um,
great observation. And you see it in narrative fiction, right? You'll
mm,
see the wisecracking rogue in, the, Star Wars or in Marvel and that sort of thing. You'll have those really epic moments. Okay, we're all ready to go into battle. Somebody crack a joke here.
yes.
That sort of thing happens all the time because it works, because we're
Hmm.
humans, we need that.
Yeah, humor is
Um,
my defense mechanism.
yeah, I mean, absolutely, 100%. Same here. Uh, don't pay the sailors up front. I have written down here. So
That there was some assumptions about whether or not it was better. Like, oh, they will save us because we haven't paid them yet. And I was like,
yeah,
that could go either way. If you don't pay your employees, they might just abscond with your ship.
they're not coming to
Um,
save us. We were kind of thinking, okay, what are the sailors back on the ship hearing? They're hearing
mhm.
all this stuff go off. There's a thunder wave that goes off.
Yeah.
There's shatter. There's creaking, roaring sounds, weird noises, and so and a bunch of combat. Can they hear us? What are they hearing? Would they leave? Would they come to our aid? That sort of thing. So that was a pretty cool moment. Uh, Here's a trick for a DM too. So you dropped a phase spider in on us.
Mm.
So if you
You saw every spider in the book in this boat. Almost every spider in this book. Yeah.
yeah, so the lesson I learned here is if you want to surprise, if you're having a combat, let's say in the the party, you're the DM, and the party's having too easy a time of it, just drop something in from a parallel dimension. You know,
Phase
I mean,
spiders are dope. So that's not what that spider was there the whole time. That's not what
uh,
happened.
oh, okay.
Um, but
But you can surprise
yeah, you don't have
your
to tell them
players.
that.
Yeah.
And
So
I had the druid called out to somebody, Royal. I think the name was, I don't know.
yeah,
His pet,
he
he
said,
called out to the pet phase
Royal, get the
spider.
mage.
He said, "Get the mage." And you guys, or at least I think some of you thought that there was a mage coming. That like,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
but he was telling the spider to attack the sorcerer that just cast Shatter on him. And we also had a nice conversation about like what happens to the rest of the room when you cast Shatter on a boat.
Right.
And I was like, the ceiling's starting to cave in a little bit, you know.
Broke the mast.
There's consequences. This you are inside an object. This whole place is an object.
I thought that was going to have a consequence later because at one point we're going to lower the paladin, or the paladin is going to lower himself down a rope, and we wanted to tie it off to the mast. And I thought, well, the mast was damaged by the shatter spell. So,
Yes.
but
And I wasn't going to say that until someone was tied to it.
yeah,
You went with a
lit
different plan.
literally tied to the mast. Too funny.
Yeah, and if there weren't a whole 35 feet away that was going to drop you down, maybe I would have been more enticed to create that hole. Um, because yeah, never be afraid to send your players to the next or one of the player characters to the next level and then see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. If the party doesn't separate themselves, you can separate them with trapdoors and weak floors and things like that. So that's pretty cool. We had an epic moment where, well, the spiders, I said spiders from Mars, but it was a spider that was in a phase. Um, but yeah, and it popped up behind us, which is always fun. So now the party's got to go in two directions. So the original plan was the Paladin has an ability where he can increase his armor class to like 22 or something like that. So he just runs into danger. By doing so, he creates an opportunity for the rogue because the rogue will have advantage on an attack, right? Because he's got an enemy within 5 feet of the enemy he's
Well, no,
shooting at.
you have
Oh no, that's
it's not
this.
true
I keep
strike.
getting this mixed up. Okay, let's do
Yeah.
this right.
You have steady aim. If you don't move, you have advantage on demand, which procs sneak attack, but also someone within 5 feet of your target procs sneak attack.
That's what it is.
Um,
That's what it is. The
which is a big it's a boost for
the
rogues.
steady
People
aim actually uh gives me advantage, I believe.
yeah.
Yeah, but you have to. So the rogue at level 3, all rogues get this. Um, they can trade their basically they trade their movement for they're like a sniper. They're really just sitting there waiting for, lining up the shot. So
I
they're
find
gonna
that
get
the internet
advantage.
discourse just underestimates rogues. You know, in these like theoretical white room builds at level 17, like, okay, yeah, they're not the strongest thing, but they put out ample damage. They're fun to play, and you always have other stuff to do. It's not the game isn't just combat. The other two-thirds of the game are also fun for rogues.
Well,
So
that's
I'm a big
interesting.
fan of rogues.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that. What I'm finding with the rogue, and maybe I want too much because that's just my nature. I always want
Mhm.
more. Um, but in these type of combat scenarios, I feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And that's probably
Ah,
me just being uncreative, but like the optimal thing to do was like make ranged attacks. At one point, there was difficult terrain between us and the enemies, so it made sense to do that. We were also another one where the rogues shooting down through a hole into the lower
mm,
deck, so it made sense to
mm.
do that, not jump down there. But what I find myself craving is everybody else is like using special abilities, doing I'm using special abilities too, but they're using things with more color, and I want some spell casting. So I don't know
Yes.
if I'm gonna like multi-class this rogue so I can get some spell casting, or if I want to try to retcon it and make an arcane trickster so that I get spells that way. But it feels like there's one element missing for me at the moment.
And that's the Marshall caster divide. Even if you boost the Marshall's numbers, magic is cool and is a gigantic toolbox. So yeah, I do like Arcane Tricksters. Again, we're in a weird transitional phase where we literally started playing one game and now we're playing another game. It doesn't feel like that because they're very similar games, but
Yeah.
I declared that like between sessions, you can respec. You can legit go back and rebuild your character if you want to switch subclasses, if you want to try something else out. We have a good table. I spelled it out anyway, as long as that's not I'm not fighting abuse cases of that. As long as you're not gaming the system where it's like, okay, this is an exploration heavy thing, so I'm going to build this
Oh,
subclass, and now for
right,
combat I'll build this guy, and now for
right.
exploration I'll build this guy. I don't foresee that, but it's worth putting that forward anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to change subclasses between sessions, go for it. Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. And then we get to learn more things too. Like there's a
Right.
there's a benefit to it.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like like we were talking about the idea of play testing, but you just gave me an idea for a possible campaign. Maybe it's a sci-fi campaign or a cyberpunk kind of campaign where
Mhm.
you do that. Like you do have different loadouts for different missions, maybe. I mean, with D&D, you can do it with equipment and you can do it with like your spell lists and things like that. And we've talked about this also in different videos where it looks like the short rest is designed to do some things. And the long rest is designed for a lot of the spellcasters to say, oh, you know what? I took this spell, but I really don't use it or need it. I think I'm going to need, more offensive spells. I'm going to need more damage dealing spells. Or maybe in this scenario, we're going to be in an open area, so I need more area of effect spells.
Yeah.
And then they can retool their spell lists depending on the class in some cases to do that, which I think is pretty cool because it's kind of helps with that kind of player regret that I sort of experienced a little bit with this all military martial rogue build, but it helps it for spellcasters so that they don't feel stuck, right?
hmm
Like,
hmm
oh my gosh, I'm an evocation wizard and I need some abjuration spells, like they can do that. And wizards can do that, but like that's just kind of a flavorful example of what I'm trying to talk about. So
And they recognized that and addressed it by making everyone's a prepared caster now, which I hate because they just changed the definition of what prepared means. But yes, every caster has more ability to change spells. A lot of them are on the level up, to like swap out spells.
so when you say they changed what they mean by prepared caster, tell everybody what you mean by that.
Well, it's almost like it's hard for me to talk about. I haven't even like sorted out like the verbiage because they they
Okay.
they made a knot out of the whole thing. But it used to be known spells and prepared spells. So like a sorcerer knows X amount of spells. That's what they can cast. Wizard has and that yeah so the sorcerer knows X amount of spells. They have those spells prepared. That's it. A wizard has a spell book, so here's all the spells that they could possibly prepare. Every morning they do a build out. A cleric has access to every spell on the cleric spell list, and can every morning choose to prepare whatever spells they want off of that list.
Mm.
So that used to be the difference. Now they say there's only prepared spellcasters because like a ranger on level up can swap out one of their spells, which is not the same thing as every morning I wake up and like, oh, it's a town day. I'm gonna take these 8 spells. Oh, we're going into combat the next day after a long rest. I'm gonna take a completely different loadout of spells.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it gives you a ton of versatility if you can swap out all of your spells all of the time,
Yeah.
essentially. It's more work, it's more homework on the player. When I ran a cleric, I literally had 3 like loadouts. I'm like,
You
all right,
already had them prepared, kind of.
yeah, because otherwise, like you go nuts. Um, and yeah, and there are other systems. It's funny, Knave 2E. I just got a physical copy of, but there's a lot of systems where like it's a classless system is always very appealing to me, where like you're a dungeoneer, you go into the dungeon and You find a dope sword or you find a magic wand, your character's behaving differently now. And now you bring those things back to the tavern or your stronghold, your bastion, which you were talking about on Friday.
Yeah.
Now, okay, I'm gonna feel like a wizard today, and I'm gonna feel like a fighter tomorrow because if I use this wand, I can't wear armor at the same time. Yeah, it's interesting to give you options. There's also the idea, like in old school essentials, we were doing it a little bit where you have like a stable of characters. You can have multiple player characters under
Yeah.
your belt. That's
Yeah.
what, you need an easier character creation system to really make that viable.
Hmm.
And level not matter as much. But that's an old school way of playing, which I really enjoy, which is like literally you're gonna roll out the fighter today. The wizard's gonna stay home and whatever, make some scrolls in the meantime. And then the next adventure, maybe you roll out your wizard or your rogue or thief or whatever.
That's a great way to incorporate bastions into the campaign. So like
Yeah.
these guys all hike out at the same bastion and now it's whose turn is it to go?
Hmm.
Yeah, and somebody stays behind. So the that's interesting though that you mentioned that because spell scrolls came up and we were
Mm.
talking about the rules of like, can non-magic users use a spell scroll? Can they just say the words and the magic happens? And the answer is no, right?
It has to be on your spell list. And I've house ruled that in different ways over time. But right now, I'm pretty much trying to play by the book because we're still learning this system. I'm pretty sure I'm comfortable with that change eventually, but I don't quite know. It's the interactions that get you, right? On the surface, you're looking at this one rule. It's like, oh, okay, I could see if I do it this other way, that won't change much, but it actually might change a lot depending on what other things click into that.
Right.
There's some feat somewhere about spell scrolls where or whatever. There's some interaction that I don't know about yet that might cause me to regret changing the verbiage. And you can kind of understand like narratively, like, okay, this rogue, I don't if I get a set of blueprints, right? Like I can understand a little bit of it. I can understand where the walls are at, but like
Can't build a house.
I can't build a house.
Yeah.
I don't know if does this indicate electrical wires or plumbing? That's a big difference. It's a big problem if I reverse those or connect those. So,
Good
yeah, I
point.
could it does make sense that like you have to be able to know the spell to cast the spell. I like the idea the rogue can make an Arcana check and like maybe they do. Maybe maybe we roll on a wild magic table. If you roll a one, there's more interesting and more fun ways to deal with it. But right now I'm running pretty much rules as written.
Well, I like the wild magic table. So anytime you can incorporate that, that's always fun because
Yes.
just random things happen. The other thing somebody said, I think it was Patrick, he said that sometimes you need a DC 10 plus your spell level even if you are a caster in order to successfully make a successful check in order to
I
use a
think
spell
that's
scroll. If
I
it's
think that's
above
still
your
true.
level, I think.
I think that's still true. Yeah, it's a check to cast something that you want to be able to otherwise. I think that's still true. I'd have to look that up.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so we learned a lot about the mechanics. Dancing lights is concentration. That's interesting. So
Which I've
like,
always hated. Like dancing lights is
uh,
so much cooler than light, but people don't use it because it's concentration.
yeah, yeah, we were joking that like, it's like starting a disco in the dungeon and the DJ has to concentrate,
Hmm.
in order to like not miss the segues and the cues and stuff. But yeah, it's yeah, dancing lights is a lot of fun. So yeah, so we continued to search the ship. We fought ettercaps and large spiders, and then we came to this room where there was like a bunch of like, I don't know. I was thinking of it as like egg cases that were
Mm.
on a wall, but no, it turns out there's some kind of fiendish property to them because again, the paladin was able to do something, divine sense, or it was the wizard maybe was able to cast detect magic. It was one of the two of them. I can't remember which
He
one.
had divine sense up,
No, divine sense was up.
and he got the. It's interesting. The boat is like just over 60 feet, so he got the undead, but he didn't get the demons
On
on
the
the other
first
side of the
one.
in the bow, yeah, the
Yeah.
bow.
Yeah.
hmm
Interesting.
So I gave it to him because it was I wasn't quite sure. I said cocoons, which is still not quite the word,
Right.
but you guys were thinking egg sacs based on my like because I try to like get descriptive with things. I don't just spell it out sometimes because it's more interesting, but occasionally there's a gap between what I mean and what I say and what you hear and interpret it to be, especially with five people at the table in a noisy room. So I'm always quick to clarify. If the player is thinking something that the character would know better, I always try to intervene. You know, I like mysteries. I like the possibility for multiple answers to questions. However, if the player characters would understand something that I have failed to get the players to understand, I'm always going to, even to the degree of breaking immersion, make sure that it's clear to the players what's going on.
Well, we had just uh, gone through a bunch of rooms with various size spiders and a lot of spider silk. So I think that's where it came from. Plus,
Yeah.
I just rewatched like one of the first episodes of Delicious in Dungeon
Mm,
where there's a big egg case. And so that's kind of what was in my mind. But
yeah.
that has nothing to do with your description. It has entirely to do with my imagination of the events. But that's a good point to emphasize for people, for DMs. Each player is gonna have a little bit of a different understanding of what's going on, even when the five of us were planning on what we were going to do when we found the hole in the floor to the next deck, the lowest deck, which is presumably where the treasure is that we need to, the object that we need to go get, the MacGuffin. And we're looking down there, we're making a plan, but as we're making a plan, people are thinking about what they're going to do on their turn. And so the plan starts to change. And so literally people are rearranging the figurines on the hex map, physically. And at one point there's some confusion because Patrick says to me, like, why are you over there? Are you going to be over there? I thought you were going to, and I'm like, no, 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 I'm over here.
hmm
Somebody just moved the actual little figurine. But and then um the sorcerer was going to cast fairy fire, which was going to give us all advantage on attacks if the creatures fail their dexterity saving throw. But then he says, no, I'm going to cast light on this guy's boots so that we can all see down there. And so, you know, there's variations, people there's a plan and then the plan goes awry. And that's what happens in real life anyway.
Yes.
So that makes it more fun. But, when you try to get two people to agree on something, and then you add a third, and now there's five, and so at one point, you as the DM are like, okay, what order are you going to do these things? Okay, we need to have an action order, right? So basically, you let us determine our initiative order, but which makes sense if you're planning something like this. I've done that in the past as well.
Yeah, and I've been advocating a lot of like doing less, let the players plan and debate and discuss. But it is worth saying that there's only so much of that worth doing because no plan survives contact with the enemy.
That's right.
And again, and it's nobody's fault. It's a good life lesson dealing with humans. Like communication is happening in a third space between the people, right? There's plenty of ways to get screwed up without anybody doing anything wrong. So yeah, I got up, I went to the bathroom, I let you guys talk it out for a long time. I didn't interject once I knew that you guys knew the situation. And then after, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes had passed, probably less. When enough time, when you started going around in circles is really a good indicator where
Yeah.
it's okay,
Okay. It's
we're
time
back.
to like, yeah.
We're repeating the thing. So it's like, okay, now we're going. Tell me what you're doing and in what order. We're going to establish. Boom, 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 boom. We're going to make this decisive. I'm writing it down. Show me on the map where you are. Like I very rarely move the minis. Like the monsters, obviously, but like I give the players. I know some whatever. Some people play blackjack rules, don't touch the table or whatever, but like
Ah,
show me where your guy is on the map when you do this thing. You had it wasn't a surprise round per se, but you knew the enemies were there, they knew you were there. You had time to form a plan and then do it the way you wanted to do it. tell me what you're doing. It's good to go in order. And now we've established initiative and we're going. Like it's on now.
Well, my first one of my feelings at that, was at some point we had taken so long to we were taking too long to make a plan and it was slowing down the game. That was my first thing, my first thought. In retrospect, looking at it though, if we had gone with the initial plan, that was not a good plan. That wasn't as good a plan as the plan that we came up with. So
Mm,
it is important for the players and the DM, I think, it can be important for them to have a little bit of patience so that, the players actually get to do what they want to do. And even if it's not the most optimal plan, if there's a break in the action, if there's no time constraints, then it makes sense for that conversation to happen. As long as
right.
the players will kind of self-regulate on that. They'll get to the point where somebody will get to the point where they're like, okay, that's enough. Let's just do something. And so I think that happens.
Yeah. And it's different if, say, you're teaching younger children how to play D&D, which you do all the time, like different set of rules here. But like we're a bunch of grown adults sitting at the table. So for me to not share authority, right? Or like agency. Like we don't need a governor. We need a referee.
Right.
We need somebody who's like watching the clock or whatever, but like we're also sharing all of these responsibilities. I will let go of the reins and delegate a lot of this stuff. Um, it's a cooperative game, so you don't have to be a dictator. And it's interesting if you create that space for people to debate, then it's much more interesting when you've lost the ability to plan because let's say we don't quite know what it is, but some gigantic tentacled sea creature is about to sink this ship. The time for discussion is over. Now we're in bullet time. Tell me what you're doing. You got 6 seconds. Like
That's right.
I don't want to play that game every night, but once in a while, maybe for like the first hour or so of a session, oh boy, that's fun. You can't sustain it though. It gets less fun for people over time, but when it
Yeah.
comes up, oh
Yeah.
man, it's what are you doing? What are you doing? You don't have
Right.
time to talk about it. What are you
That's right.
doing?
When you
Act,
enforce the
act.
no talking rule, like you can't talk to each other kind of thing. That's like you said, it's fun for a little bit, but then it gets old. So
Yeah.
yeah, so you want to have that used as a punctuation. And that's what happened. So basically for those who are watching for the narrative, we got into the hold, the bilge waters down there. We were able to snipe these I was gonna say whites, not whites.
Guests. I think I
Ghasts.
said
Yeah.
ghouls earlier. They
Yeah.
were guests, and you made pretty quick work. Like you did
Yeah,
good.
we
Like, it
split the
was,
party and we still made quick work of them, which
yeah,
was
it was a good
amazing
strategy.
because yeah, the splitting of the party, I didn't really like that idea. I thought let's all kill them and then go get the box, but somebody else had a different plan, which was to go down, a different way. And that was fine. It worked out. We got the box, but we did hear this it was a throwback to evidence we found on the ship, which was like torn uh horizontal planks out of the outer hull and these big suction cup kind of looking evidence that there was, tentacles on there. And so now we have the session ends as the ship seems to be under attack. We don't know that. We know that we hear this big creaking sound and the ship's starting to list even further. So, and that's where we left this session. So good cliffhanger ending. Cliffhanger endings are always fun.
Hmm.
Even when I run one shots, I'll do that sometimes. Or I'll at least leave an open thread for a possible second adventure, right?
Yes, because you want the players to be thinking about the game after the session and
Yeah,
leaving those open loops. Like I just ended a 2-year campaign,
really.
and there was threads and arrows, and like we could return to that story tomorrow, and people are still thinking about it because of that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that Bastion talk we did on you were nice enough to let me substitute for you on Casual Friday on Ryan's channel. So on Ryan's channel every Friday there's a live stream from at 3 o'clock Eastern, and three DMs talk about DMing and the new rules and things are in the news about D&D, that kind of stuff. It was fun. But we did talk about bastions. And that's something for people to do in the off time too, is design their bastion and come up with ideas of what their secret hideout looks like. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm pumped that we're getting more of the downtime side of the game.
Yep, exactly. Speaking of downtime, I gotta get some stuff done. So before I go teach today, so thanks for the talk, and we'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.